This week, Allison Miller joins us for an interview. Mick Douglas of the Sands Institute, former host here on Security Weekly, will join us for a technical segment on feeding common logs into elk stacks for fun and profit, I guess. We report on the security news. I heard Apple had a vulnerability this week. Certainly spent some time talking about that, as well as a smattering of other stories. WordPress makes the news for actually debuting some hardened security features. The NSA Red Disk data leak, HP silently installing telemetry bloatware on your PCs, because that's always fun. Cryptocurrency was in the news quite a bit this week. Hoping Larry can fill us in on that. There was a mining script that runs even after you close your browser as well, so we'll discuss that. All that and more on this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. I'm, of course, your host, Paul Asadorian. Excited to be here, as always, on Paul's Security Weekly.
Hi, and welcome to the show. I totally introduce our host right now, but I've got a totally awkward boner.
What? Where? Oh, hey! I'm in the studio with you guys. That's kind of cool.
Sounds like a plan.
And we'll at least have one person listening.
That's right. Just saying.
Yeah, I know, and I appreciate it, and I'm glad you enjoyed your spooning with Jeff. But hey,
that's actually built a new office.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, third baby on the way, so I needed a new office.
Nice.
I lost my old office. That's now the baby room.
Brought to you by... Has your network been breached? Cybereason can help you answer this question. Cybereason products hunt for threats within your network and eliminate them in real time. To Cybereason, real time means within seconds. Founded by former military hackers who don't play by the rules, they've built this experience into their platform. Harness ingenuity and imagination, not just code, to defeat attackers. Cybereason, disrupt the adversary and let the hunt begin. Endgame automates the hunt for both known and never-before-seen adversaries in enterprise networks. Built on unique knowledge on the adversary's tools, techniques, and tactics, Endgame's centrally managed agent prevents, detects, and responds to advanced adversaries in the earliest stages of the kill chain without prior knowledge. Endgame, automate the hunt. The average time between being hacked and realizing you've been hacked is 1 year. Can you afford to let an intruder roam your network for that long? Can your company weather the fallout when this comes to light? Black Hills Information Security can find the bad guys in your network and train you to do it yourself. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a hunt teaming engagement can help you find a persistent threat in your network.
And welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to a man who I thought had a brilliant idea a couple shows ago. He said, Larry, what we really need is an Amazon dash button that when you press, it orders a Raspberry Pi 3. So, Paul, I present to you your very own Amazon AWS IoT dash button so you can program just that. Paul Asadorian, folks.
Wait, you didn't program it for me?
You gotta figure that shit out.
It's programmed to order something. Now I'm really afraid to push it and see what's going to be delivered to my house. Welcome, everyone, to Paul Security Weekly, episode 538 for November 30th, 2017.
It actually just orders Preparation H to Santa's house.
Well, that would be appropriate. Poor Santa. I'd like to introduce our host for this evening, Larry Pesci, of course, to my left. Thank you very much, Larry, for my wonderful gift.
You get to figure it out now.
I will. I may actually make it order Raspberry Pis because we never seem to have. Did you see the Raspberry Pi tree on the table in there?
No.
Yeah, Kyle built like this little tree.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Nice.
It's pretty awesome. I'm excited to be here. It's going to be a fantastic show. On the lines via Skype, Mr. Jeff Mann. I can see you now. I can see Mr. Jeff Mann. How's
Look
it going,
what
Jeff?
I have. I have Vegemite. And the next time in studio, Joff is going to teach us how to eat it.
Vegemite. Do I dare ask?
Yes, I've had Vegemite. It's delicious.
Okay. I'll take your word for it because I've never had it and I don't know what it is. And therefore, I will transition into introducing Mr. Joff Thayer, even. Thayer. It's Joff Thayer.
Thayer, Joff.
On the lines via Skype. Joff, welcome to the program.
G'day, Paul. How are you? So, yeah, Jeff and I did have a brief conversation about Vegemite. And if you're willing, it won't be the next show because I'll be in Munich. But we can do a Christmas show where we talk about cooking toast, in a toaster, of course, and how to apply the Vegemite properly so that you will enjoy the taste.
I don't think making toast is really cooking. I'm just saying it's more like heating bread rather than actual cooking.
So what
I
he's saying is make sure
fancy it
there's
up
a
a little
toaster
bit.
in the studio in 2 weeks.
I do have a Darth Vader toaster in the studio that puts the Star Wars logo on the side of the toast. It's not a great toaster, but it looks really cool, and the toast looks really cool.
We just need toast, and we need
Vegemite.
some good butter, and a little bit of Vegemite. I'll show you how to do it. And once you know how to do it right, see, the biggest mistake in the U.S., people over-apply the Vegemite, and that's the trick. So we should do this together so we can enjoy it.
Well, I'd say I'm excited, but I'm not quite sure the excitement quite sums it up.
You should be excited.
I
You
am
might
excited.
end up programming your little button to order Vegemite.
I might.
Just saying.
It could be the Vegemite
Well,
button.
you could get addicted.
Quick announcement. Make sure you do two things for us. One, subscribe to our mailing list, securityweekly.com/insider. We'll give you exclusive updates and invite you to some awesome webcasts that are coming up. One is with Pony Express, and one is with Logarithm. And we'll be talking about problems and solutions associated with those two organizations. You're going to want to tune in. Larry
Yeah.
is going to come do a webcast with us.
Yeah.
So Larry's going to talk about Wi-Fi exploits, and who better to talk about Wi-Fi exploits than Larry Pesce?
Yeah, it's sort of little Wi-Fi exploits, but with very much an IoT twist to it.
Absolutely.
Finding
Absolutely.
IoT in your environment.
We just installed some IoT devices here in the studio so we could monitor them. We have the Pone Pulse here in the studio. So we did Smart Things, Ring, and Arlo.
Nice.
So you probably already discovered those devices and are poning us as we speak, Larry, but we have those devices nonetheless. You can go to securityweekly.com/subscribe. Subscribe to all of our shows: Secure Digital Life Hack, Naked News, Startup Security Weekly, and Enterprise Security Weekly. All of those feeds are available as separate shows for you to download, listen, and hopefully enjoy. I'd like to introduce our special guest for this evening, who's been waiting patiently. We had some equipment problems. Allison Miller is here with us, who's been working on the intersection of cybersecurity, human behavior, and predictive analytics for almost 2 decades. She has a great reputation in the industry, and I apologize for not having you on the show sooner. It's wonderful to have you on the program tonight. Allison, welcome to the show.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you.
Good to see you as well, Allison, and it's nice to meet you, albeit virtually. Allison, tell us how you got your start in information security.
Oh, sure. Well, I actually started off in an IT security analyst role at a pharmaceutical company. I had been trying to find my way into a security group. It was still sort of a new and emerging discipline at the time, and I couldn't find my way in. So I ended up just taking an IT role. And then one thing led to another, and I asked a lot of uncomfortable questions, I guess. And so when they decided to establish a security function, I became the first hire into that group. And so I helped them develop out all of their policies, their incident response, their network monitoring, vendor reviews, threat intel. I got to help build a program from the ground up, and then things kind of took off from there.
Allison, when you were working in IT, as you said, years ago, there wasn't many official roles in information security. What were some of the challenges and some of your success stories in convincing people that security was a big enough problem to define entire roles in the organization whose sole job it was to do security?
Well, I think certainly early along, I think a lot of what I found in my work is that a lot of the development of these programs were either driven by response to an incident, which is why FUD works so well, right? Anytime there's a big breach or issue, then there's sort of a response, and there's an opportunity there to kind of sell a vision about what is needed. But then the second piece of what was really driving development was compliance. It wasn't until further along in my career that I was working more in a risk capacity, where I was able to make really good arguments just from a business perspective that security was something that needed to be built in and thought about from the very get-go when new products were being developed, as opposed to simply something that is a response later. And being in payments and financial services really helped with that, because a lot of the risks manifest as direct loss, and people who move money like to know where their money is at all times. And so you can make better kind of obvious business arguments or take position with them when you can talk in dollars and cents. And that has been something that has been really useful throughout my career.
So even outside of the financial industry, like, how have you been able to make that correlation between dollars and cents and security, which is, I think, something that many of us struggle with to this day still?
Right. So my specialty is a little specialized in the sense that I specialize in developing large-scale detection systems that you could kind of think of as operating native into a customer-facing platform. So I've worked in payments, in which case the detection is anti-fraud technology. I've worked on social platforms, in which case it may be anti-spam. I've worked in games, in which case there's sort of an anti-cheating or an anti-griefing kind of aspect to things. And I've also worked in ads and on phishing prevention and malware detection, which are also sort of similar. And across all of these, there's account security and preventing against account hijacking, however a login details may have been scooped up, whether it's by phishing or through grabbing creds off of a third-party breach. So with all of these types of threats, there's an relatively obvious impact when a transaction goes bad or spam gets delivered or a phishing attack goes through, where you can kind of approximate then what the impact is, but more importantly, you can see when harm has been done. I think what a lot of IT security professionals face that's really difficult is trying to explain what the impact is of, say, a threat or vulnerability when the loss is more indirect, meaning, information gets copied or leaked. You still have the information. Maybe you don't experience a direct financial loss because of it. That makes it a little more difficult to make a business case. When what you're trying to prevent is a fraud transaction from occurring, you can explain the cost of declining a good transaction by mistake versus experiencing the loss associated with a fraud transaction that goes through. And then it's already in dollars. It makes it easier. So these sort of unit-based detection problems, I think, are a lot easier to quantify and then make a business case back to the finance and business folk.
Could we extend that into some of the other areas of security? And I've always described the fraud problem as something that is, like you said, relatively easy to define scope. And we know, like, money's moving from point A to point B, and if there's some issue with it, it's very well defined. When we get into the threat landscape for an organization that's very vast and broad outside of fraud, people tend to get lost and lose sight of that message. Are there lessons we can learn from fraud prevention that we can apply to traditional information security?
Yes, and I'm going to have to take my cat ears to get into this with you.
So it's getting serious now. Now we're serious. Now I'm scared.
What are you going to take off, Paul?
The ears are off. The gloves are off.
The ears are off. So this is
your
one of the
booties off.
things that I am so excited to bring back to IT security or cybersecurity or whatever we want to call the sort of next generation or next philosophy that we're going to use as we try and figure out how to secure large systems, because I think there's a lot of economic drivers that go unexamined, that if we could get a little more comfy with them, then we could incorporate them into the case we make for doing our work. So I find that anti-fraud is very disciplined in a way that intrusion detection can't be, because a fraud transaction is very structured, and it's a very structured event. Whereas when you're trying to put your arms around a whole network and evaluate the cost, say, or risk associated with chains of events, there's things that can be learned, but it's difficult to apply it directly. However, I'm absolutely of the belief that we can get more mature as far as our metrics for performance and some of the lessons that we can take around quantifying and measuring impact, loss, and success. And I think we actually have to. I mean, this is one of the things I get a little bit het up about, because there is no such thing as a security risk, an IT security risk. It's not separate. What I mean is it's a business risk. It's either a risk or an exposure, or it's not. And if all of our stuff, because we're security nerds, gets lumped into security risks and it's evaluated separately from all the other things that a business needs to take in consideration, we're dead in the water as far as advancing our practice and actually protecting our platforms and our people, because they're not separate things. They're like things. And so we need the language and the tools to make what we do part of the business, as opposed to we're making a case to the business to do something. I mean, we are part of the business, and we need to talk like the business and present cost benefit to the business in ways that are accessible to them. It's not just a communication problem between us and marketing, let's say. I think it's a communication issue around how we talk about ourselves and think about ourselves within the industry, not just with our colleagues and other groups. If
Jeff,
that kind of makes sense.
I'm sorry, Jeff, you had
a little bit there.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. Now, I have questions, but Jeff also has a question, so I'm going to let Jeff go first.
Well, Allison, you just dumped probably 10 episodes worth of content on us. I wanted to back up to what you were saying about fraud. I was at a fraud summit, I don't know, sometime in the last year or so, and I was listening to all these different talks about people talking about this, that, and the other with regards to fraud and anti-fraud activities. And, you know, I kept thinking, wow, this is all security. They're talking about security. And I asked somebody about that, and I kind of got a whoa, you know, that's a whole different group. We don't talk security around here. We're fraud people. So I'm curious as to if you've encountered that in your space of what you're doing with the anti-fraud discussion and learning, and how do you bridge do you see that there's silos there, and how do you bridge that, or how are you bridging that?
Right. So every organization is different, of course, but yes, in my experience, the anti-fraud or the anti-spam team, they're very different than the security team. And I think there's a couple things that might help there. One is we kind of need to get a little bit more expansive about who we consider to be a security person. If we only consider threat intel analysts and reverse engineers and network security engineers and IR people as security people, then we miss out on learning from all of these other adjacent groups. So when I was in financial services, the risk group, those were the anti-fraud people, and they were primarily statisticians because they had these automated models, and if fraud went up, they tightened the model. And if they wanted to approve more transactions and they were okay with taking slightly more losses, you know, it made financial sense, they loosened the model. So they had one thing. They sort of throttled things up or throttled things down, depending on the business return that they wanted and what was going on in the environment. And they barely spoke to the folks who were in security because they were seen as, those are the folks who are securing the network, securing our laptops, making sure that the site doesn't get DDoSed into wherever. But if it was something that was customer facing, it was something that was affecting customers, it was dealt with in this other risk group. And so I actually have the way that I've sort of bridged these groups is by personally kind of having one foot in one group and one foot in another group. Well, or maybe an octopus is a better metaphor since there's usually 8 to 10 different groups. I mean, anti-money laundering might be a different group than the fraud group, might be a different group than the security group, might be a different group than the folks who are actually building the products. And those were definitely different groups than the customer service groups. And so the way that I have bridged those is by just being like a polyglot, speaking the language of these different groups and trying to interpret between them. When I was at PayPal, I was in the risk group, meaning the one that was making decisions about the fraud models and building those fraud models. But I was responsible for account security. Now, the security team also had an interest in this, but they didn't have any consumer-facing or user-facing real estate on the site, if you want to think of it that way. That was all my domain. So what I just did was I tried to coordinate, because when it comes to the threats to customer account security, I want my risk modelers modeling, but I also want to make sure that my peeps who are paying attention to what's happening in the dark web are able to give us information to help us design and implement things better. So I think that's going to continue to be the case. Every organization is different, but typically the folks who are doing anti-abuse or who are doing security are a different group of people than the ones who are actually building and managing the products that folks are using. My experience is intensely platform focused, in the sense that I've worked on platforms where people log into an account and versus something like boxed shipped software, or I spent very little time in pharmaceuticals. But wherever I've gone in my career, there's been all of these different groups who affect the overall customer experience, and what they do affects the overall risk of the organization based on the products that they're creating and how they manage them.
Allison, how can we better foster communication between the teams that are doing security for customer-facing applications and the teams that are doing IT security? I feel like we use the term IT security, and we should use the term information security, I think, more accurately, because, I mean, while they are two different functions, the threats are coming at the entire organization with no regard for which group handles what.
Right. I think that one place where groups can kind of get together and figure out what each other's strengths are is in the area of threat modeling. And then also, I do think that the folks who are doing information security, cyber, whatever you want to call it, they can provide a feedback loop back to the product developers or the product managers that those folks might not get without some additional help. So I think that would be a really valuable place to kind of build that relationship, so that when a product manager has a question about, my MVP, I'd like to get some minimum viable security for my MVP, who could help me figure out if this is going to work or if this is going to be a problem. So threat modeling is a place. So I've done a lot of threat modeling for things like account security issues across all kinds of different user flows. And that's a place where folks like doing that. It's creative, and they can bring their own expertise to bear.
Yeah, and that's a constant process as well, where I think both sides still have a lot to learn, is specifically when we talk about DevOps and containers. I feel like we're in a bad situation when it comes to that. And there are organizations that are leading the charge, but I think the majority of businesses today haven't understood the impact of that. Have you noticed that and have suggestions as to how we can bridge that gap? Excuse me.
Can you say that question again? How we can bridge the gap in other places?
Yeah. So there's when you talk about like speaking to the product manager about having questions about how to improve product security, how do we allow them to talk to security and have those communications take place while both sides understand the problem? I feel like today a lot of the IT security folks, or information security folks, I should say, don't understand some of the new technology being used. So when they come to some questions, we're like, I don't know yet. So, but also the developers don't know how to do the threat modeling either, because they don't fully understand how to roll something out in a full DevOps model. So how do we get both teams talking and educated?
Okay, yeah, I understand what you mean. So that's it. And what you're sort of talking about with the security folk not necessarily understanding the underlying product, the underlying product to secure it, is also definitely a place where a conversation should be initiated. The reason why I bring up threat modeling is because I feel like we have a bit of a pipeline problem in security, and I'm not talking about hiring. What I mean is that if we as security folk offer to kind of freelance consult for product makers too early in the process, then we burn too many cycles consulting on vapor. But if they get too far along in the design and architecture process, then we have to unwind things. So it's really difficult to figure out where to make a fixed process and have kind of a review gate. And also that feels very compliance-y, and most product makers, especially ones that are trying to build something new, they are really good at avoiding any kind of, they're good at putting off or avoiding formal review. So I suggest something like threat modeling, because as you say, it can happen at any time because threats can change. And every once in a while, even if you did threat modeling on a specific set of flows 2 years ago, maybe things have changed. And it's always a good time to kind of, check your threats. And so I think that that's a good way to develop a relationship, but also to kind of key makers into some of the problems that security builders need to be aware of. The best product managers that I have worked with have come to me with products that they're working on when they need input. And they know when they need input because they've actually done some of the due diligence ahead of time, because we had gone through a soup to nuts kind of program with them on a previous product. So it's not education and awareness exactly. It's really about figuring out how you want to work with these other groups in the business and collectively what the risks are and the threats are that you're managing against, and figuring out how to make that process a little bit more organic. Also, I think it's useful to have formal review gates and make sure that the entire business understands, nothing leaves the ranch until it's been checked and graded by whoever needs to do that, and make sure that you've got security folks sitting near QA folks so that things don't get pushed to prod that need to be rolled back immediately because they're a surprise.
Many of the problems that we have today in security more communication and relationship based, more so than technology and so much process based?
Do I think the problems are more relationship based? Is that
more of a communication and relationship building issue, or lack of building relationships, more so than a technology sort of issue?
That's a good one. I don't really know. I mean, I've certainly heard a lot of folks sort of saying that security folks need to get more soft skills and work on their communication skills. But I almost feel like it's not really that. It's really just that in the technology world, everyone speaks a different language. And so a lot gets lost in translation if you don't you need to make sure the lines of communication are really open, and almost like you need to practice speaking with each other so that someone on the other end understands the words coming out of my mouth. And when I say something is really important, that they understand where I'm asking them to focus and what kind of changes are need to be made. It's a little more like, I feel like it's a little bit more of an organizational maturity question. a lot of us work at companies that are very new, and we're doing things that haven't been done before. And so roles are really fluid, and the people who you work with, your colleagues, may be pretty fluid. And so I guess that falls in under communication problem, but I think it's less a question of, I'm an introvert and I don't really want to walk over to this other department to talk to a bunch of people who don't want to hear what I have to say and I mumble. It's less that kind of communication problem and more of an organizational design, organically, where is this whole ship going and how do we all work together, that kind of communication problem. It's not just an information security issue. It's like all of these sort of development organizations need to figure out how they want to work, and then they need to practice so that how they work works.
Questions from others?
I had one question related to that, Paul. So, Allison, do you think that historically information security, I guess this is a bit of a statement and a question. Historically, I think information security professionals have been perceived as the people that like to say no a lot. Do you think that makes it more difficult to build those relationships because of that historical perception?
Sure. Yeah, of course. But we're certainly not alone in that. I mean, who else likes to say no? Legal likes to say no. Compliance likes to say no. Finance likes to say no. There's lots of teams that the problem happen. The risk to them is that they've approved something and it goes wrong. Versus maybe there are teams where they have troubles when they didn't go far enough fast enough. So that's a sort of a gentle tension. And I believe that there are times when information security, compliance, legal, and finance are going to have to say no. And that's just part of their role. But I do think that, times have changed since IT security was in a corner. It's now a really center stage important issue for a lot of different types of businesses. Ones that never really thought of themselves in the information business now are. And so I think that this is an opportunity. Whatever our role was in the past, we needed to figure out what we want our role to be next. And I think that's a bigger problem, and it's on us, not on these folks who we've worked with historically and maybe have impressions of how we work and why we work. I think it's on us to kind of articulate what it is that we want our role to be in a mature operation. And I'm actually excited about that.
I think, Allie, you touched on something interesting from a very practical standpoint, talking about how IT or security or whatever we're calling it, the technology is more important now than ever before. But in the beginning, which wasn't that long ago, it was very, and I've done a lot of consulting work, been to a lot of client sites, and IT 9 times out of 10, and security was usually attached to IT, was in the basement, was in a temporary building out in the back of the campus, was in a building down the street, was in a building across town. So very, very physically removed, very physically not present within the organization. And I agree with you that, the times have changed, but I wonder if any of us have seen a change in terms of just the physicality, the location of the technical people. Yes, we all need to talk together. Yes, we need to work together more. But if we're in separate buildings, if we don't know where people are, that can only compound the problem. What are ways to try to improve that without just going to companies and saying, hey, you've got to, buy a new building and put everybody together in one place?
Well, I think that there's a couple trends that may help us out. One is, there are a lot of organizations that have moved to DevOps. Again, I come from a world of platforms, so there are a lot of different types of organizations out there that this model may or may not be relevant. But I love the idea that we're starting to realize that a lot of us have roots as administrators, right? A firewall admin, an email admin, network admin, whatever it was. Someone else picked the technology. It was just our job to manage whatever it is. And with DevOps, I feel like there's an understanding that you can't just build and push something. You build something, and that's the beginning of operating whatever the thing is. And so this idea that engineering and operations are together, they're both builders. Together, they make sure the right system is getting built and operated. I think that that's useful for us. And I feel like the sort of trend of security not just being an administrative function, but being a build function. We are building security in. We are building our security defenses. I love that as a trend. I think that when we show that we are building and we are contributing to our organizations, in these positive ways where what we do is additive as opposed to simply kind of like the insurance policy, I think that then we get appreciated more. Also, if you have a building full of security admins and you're locked in a basement, please tweet. Let us know. We'll call your HR folks. Maybe they'll let you out.
Or not, depending on how nice your HR folks are.
Right. So, and my experience is a little bit different than some folks, I think, because a lot of my career recently has been I work more with developers than I do with folks who are sort of traditional IT security. Part of that has to do with the focus of my work. I've been focusing a lot on how do we protect consumers? How do we protect small businesses online? They do not have the money to invest to hire all of us to help them out. So how can we make kind of the default technologies that they're using more secure, which is a really interesting challenge. But the way to do that, the way to scale that is not to get everybody an IT security, not to create the worldwide IT security group. It's to make sure that things that ordinary folk are working with default to secure and that they have useful options that they can choose and, opt into that are going to step level them up to the level of security that they deserve.
It's not the level of security you need, it's the level of security you deserve.
I like that. That's a great quote.
Wherever we could go from there. Should I bring my cat ears back on? Because that's like
Sure.
That's a cat ear moment.
That's a relevant reference, right?
Allison, I know you don't represent your employer here today, but your journey in your career has led you into a particular place, and I want to give you the opportunity to talk about whatever you have liberty to talk about in terms of what you're doing today.
I see. So, yeah, I've been able to work at a long list of fun factories like Visa and PayPal, eBay. I worked with Skype for a while. Thanks, Skype, owned by Microsoft now, of course, and most recently Google. So, and Electronic Arts. Don't forget, I didn't do anything with anyone's Sims installation, I promise, but I did get to witness some things associated with that. So I've been at Google, and that's been really interesting. I spent some time working with the Safe Browsing group, and that's the team that I was sort of referring to when I was talking about how to protect everyday folks as they are browsing around the web and trying to avoid things like falling for phishing scams and from downloading malware. And that's been an interesting project and set of features, because when I first heard about it, I thought, oh, okay, sure, it's a feature in Chrome, but I didn't really understand the level of work and engineering behind it, because what that system and what that team do is they're crawling the web, and they are looking for pages that are hosting phishing sites or malware. But in order to figure out something is phishing or malware, you have to have some really interesting data pipelines and classifier systems to do that with a high degree of specificity, which they do, and they have very low false positives. But that's a pretty big problem, and it's been really interesting to see how engineers and how folks might try and build that in so that the default is to something that is secure. While I was at Google, I have had a chance to work with other teams too, including some of our threat intel teams, which are amazing. But of course, I really can only talk about the things that are a little bit more public and consumer facing.
So, Allison, I think one of the concerns is that the browser becomes too bloated, too much more like an operating system. However, there are some that feel and believe that the browser should do more in security. How do you recommend, not speaking for Chrome specifically, but in general, how would you envision working that balance between providing functionality, efficiency, and performance, and also providing some of that security aspect of it?
Sure. So just speaking about safe browsing again for a second, I just think the design of that is so cool because they've figured out a privacy preserving way to make most of the work server side so that the client only really has to do anything if there's a local match to something that we know is bad. And the most recent version of the protocol, we made it much more bandwidth respectful so that folks on mobile devices could enjoy the same protections. Developers can create things that work sort of natively so that whatever kind of communication app you're in, if there's a link to something nasty, you can figure it out locally and you don't have to, phone home or what have you too often. And you don't have to spend a lot of bandwidth on updating the latest databases of partial hashes. So it's a really clever design, and we could talk about that for a while. But I would probably defer a lot of those questions about browser security to someone who works more specifically on Chrome or Firefox or Safari or what have you. It's what's interesting to me is that when I think about what's running on my laptop and when I'm mobile, I realize that I have almost the same set of apps on my laptop now as I do on my phone. I have a few specialized apps that are applications, software packages that I use for quantitative analysis that obviously I'm not going to do that on my phone. But for the most part, what I'm doing with my technology right now, in my consumer technology, is I am browsing the web in new forms through apps. Slack is an app, but Slack is basically the web. Skype is an app, but Skype is basically the web. And so if you think about the average consumer and how much technology they're really using, their browser is their window through to the internet. So I think that it makes sense to put as many protections in there as possible without inhibiting performance. But that's where the risk is, because that's how most people are using their devices right now, unless I'm mistaken and there are a lot more people, creating spreadsheets than I was expecting. I think most people's use of technology now is really about the web. So the browser, the risk has moved from, there's still risk on the desktop, but the sort of threat vector, if you will, is the browser. So I think that it's really important that we figure out how to make the defaults as secure as possible.
And who would have thought that when we first saw Mosaic in Netscape? Jeff, you have a question?
Yeah, and you may not be able to touch on this, Allie, and that's fine. I'm just curious in the discussion of consumer protection and what you're doing. Just this week, I'm not even sure if it's one of our news items, but the issue of net neutrality is coming up just in the last week or two. Does that cross into what you're doing at all, or are there concerns, from you personally, from Google as a company that may or may not rely on net neutrality? or at least
Wow.
cares about the safety of the
Wow.
consumer.
He went
like I said,
there,
you
Allison,
may
he
not
went
be able
there.
to answer or respond to it, but yeah, I'll
Yeah,
throw it out.
I think I shouldn't answer or respond to that. But
I don't think you should either.
Fair enough.
It was a good try, though, Jeff. It was a
But
good
thank
try.
you for the question.
Yeah, no problem.
I have 5 more questions for you, Allison, if you're ready to play 5
Wow.
questions with Security Weekly.
5.
5.
No, I'm not. But let's do it anyway.
Alrighty.
Hold on. I suppose.
You can put your ears on.
But yeah,
Take
go.
a swig, beer,
Drink
maybe some
and
ears.
put your ears
in it.
on.
Yeah, okay.
And that looks like it's good beer. Is that Fat Tire?
It is Sierra Nevada.
Oh, all right.
Nice, very nice.
Yeah, that's decent beer. We'll take it.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
Sierra Nevada, what? Because
It'll
it's not
do.
a green label.
It'll do.
Yeah, it'll do.
So, Allison, 3 words to describe yourself.
Ensafening the cybers.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
An icicle.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Underbelly.
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
No.
Valid answer.
She really thought about that one too. The look on Allison on your face is priceless. Allison, choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
To be my parents? Oh man. This
That's a
is
hard
bad.
one.
I'm so bad with names.
Give us
Batman and Catwoman.
Whoa.
No, that's lame. That's
Halle-
weird.
Halle
That's
Berry?
like circular.
Halle Berry was
Which
Catwoman.
version
Yeah, Halle Berry was Catwoman. Was it
in a
Michael?
movie?
Was it Michael
Eartha
Keaton?
Kitt.
Eartha
Eartha
Kitt. There you
Kitt.
go.
Eartha Kitt
There
and
you go.
Batman?
We can just say Batman. That's actually I think that's a really cool answer. There's no right or wrong answer, but Allison,
There you go.
thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly. It was wonderful having you. Nice meeting you, and great conversation. It was great.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Allie.
With that, we're going to take a short commercial break. Come back with Mick Douglas, who's going to teach us about elk stacks, that is. Stay tuned. LogRhythm's Netmon Freemium delivers real-time network visibility to quickly identify emerging threats in your IT environment. Netmon Freemium is a free commercial-grade network forensics and traffic analytics solution. You can use Netmon Freemium's powerful capabilities to search against all observed network traffic, identify abnormal traffic patterns and application usage, and quickly analyze full packet captures. Take the first step towards real-time network visibility. Visit logRhythm.com/freemium to learn more and download it today. Make sure your team is prepared to fight off the latest cybersecurity threat. IT Pro TV is the resource to keep you and your IT team skills up to date. You can stream IT Pro TV's courses live and on demand worldwide, so there's no need to send staff to off-site training. Their team solution provides access to a supervisor portal for full control over your team's training schedule and group analytics. Go to itpro.tv/Security Weekly and use the code SW30 to try it free for 7 days and receive 30% off your monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. To learn more about IT Pro TV's team solution, sign up for a free demo of their supervisor portal. NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email at contact@netsparker.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. This is our technical segment. Really quick, itpro.tv. Make sure you go there. Check it out. Go to their website. Consume all of their training. Not all at once, because it's been proven to cause serious medical issues. You should do this in stages, slowly, maybe on the weekends. It's a great way to catch up in between your other training. Like my kind of recommendation, I don't know how others feel about this, but that SANS has its place when you want to get away. You want to immerse yourself in 6 days of training. Then, when you get back to the office and you're in between things and you want to catch up on something really quick, IT Pro TV comes in and saves the day and allows your business, your employer, to purchase a supervisor portal so that you can go get training. And wait, it gets better. If you've got other people on your team that are like, you told me about this new security thing or this new technology that I should do because it helps us be more secure and better in technology, you can say, hey, you can go to IT Pro TV too and get trained up on that particular technology. There's just so many benefits of itpro.tv. Go to itpro.tv/Security Weekly. Try it free for 7 days, and our discount code SW30 gets you 30% off the monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. Cool. I'd like to now introduce a man who doesn't need an introduction, vulnerability shutter at his exploit writing skills, Mr. Mick Douglas.
Oh, drum roll.
What's going on, Mick? How are you? Mick he's been all over. He was a regular host here on Security Weekly for a while. He has worked for Black Hills Information Security, Trusted Sec. You now have your own firm, InfoSec Innovations. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
We like to say that you've graduated now and you have your own, you've moved on to the next level of having your own firm, Mick. You're still very involved with SANS, and you're teaching Sec 535, among other things, correct?
Sec 555.
555.
So it's actually, for the tech segment, we're going to be diving into some of the class. So you get a free little sneak peek into some of the stuff that you can do with Sec 555.
What is Sec 555?
Sec 555, I'm glad you asked, is all about operationalizing and doing tactical analysis with a SIM. A lot of people have a SIM, but most companies, most people, if you ask about it, they say that they hate their SIM or that it's not giving them a good return on value. And so what we're doing with this class is we're doing a lot of research and development. We're sharing the latest and greatest in terms of what you can do. And we're basically taking a back-to-basics approach where you can take simple log files and twist them in interesting ways and tell some really complicated and interesting stories that give you visibility in huge networks. And even if you're not in a very large environment, you can still benefit from having this superior understanding of what's going on in your network.
Mick, I'm researching open source tools and its usage in the enterprise. How far can you get using open source tools to accomplish some of the tasks and goals in your sim versus buying a commercial product? I know that's probably a really loaded question that would take a really long time, but if you could distill it down.
Well, so the answer is, honestly, how much time do you want to spend on it? Because there are some fantastic things out there. For instance, Black Hills InfoSec has done some fantastic work with using some of the sysinternals components and Sysmon to crack open what's going on an enterprise grade. And you can do that with, the price point of diddly boo. That's the technical term for nothing. And there's all kinds of tools out there right now. Actually,
it's also my Apple root password as well.
Yeah. Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
It's Deadly Boo.
No, it's nothing.
Funny,
it's the representation of Diddly Boo, which is nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what's funny? I have that same password, so I'm in good crowd. But no, now's a really good time to be a geek and be playing around with open source technologies, because there's more and more tools out there. The maturation is getting really impressive, and one of the things that we were talking about in the SANS Sim Summit in Scottsdale, Arizona, which was brought to you by the letter S. We were talking about how much better some of the open source tools are now. If you think about like the digital forensics frameworks like Volatility and Google's Recall, they're actually superior to some of the commercial tools that are out there. And we're seeing a very similar thing taking place with within the SIM environments. Bro. For goodness sakes, like pound for pound, that's one of the best network analyzers.
Oh, see, I thought you were just referring to me like affectionately, like bro.
Yeah.
Oh, you're actually talking about the tool, bro.
Yeah, no, Larry, you my bro, my bro, much love. But we're talking about the network monitor. Oh,
bro, the network monitor.
Larry might be a tool. Whoa.
Oh.
But Larry's our tool that we love dearly.
I'm just kidding, Larry.
My face of shock and awe.
Go ahead, Mick. We're totally screwing.
So, Mick, we're not talking about like elk, like in a sense of the animal or hunting, and it's a game kind of animal. But what is an elk stack? For those listening that don't know what an elk stack is, if you could break it down for us before we dig into
not that big set of antlers.
Yeah, well, so
that would be a stacked elk.
That could be one of the elk things, but no, actually, because this is a SANS thing, they wanted to have the slide deck. So hold on just a second. Your question on what elk is a group of technologies maintained by a group called Elastic, and elk is Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. And what Elasticsearch is, it's this basically like a big data store that you can throw your logs into that are indexed. And you can do some interesting queries and visualizations, and you do those queries and visualizations through a front end like Kibana. And then Logstash is the tool that actually gets the logs from your devices, whether they're servers, workstations, or network elements, like routers and switches, and puts them into Elasticsearch for you to do this magic playing around. And
okay, so an elk stack allows you to collect the logs, store the logs, and then analyze the logs all in one, all open source stack, correct?
Completely open source. And the other thing that's interesting is how large this can scale out. You can have multiple Elastic nodes that are all pointing, or that a single Kibana instance is interfacing with. So you can have a very large data set. And I'm not going to say the term big data more than that one time, but you can deal with large data sets. And the thing that's cool is it's, again, free. Now, there are paid, depending on the modules, you may need to get the professional version. But in Sec 555, we're showing you how to use Elk because it's free, and it's not necessarily that it's better than the commercial tools. What we're trying to do is expose how you can think and creatively use these logs that really, quite frankly, have been underutilized for decades.
Well, really just stuffed in a commercial sim and then not really able to get a lot of useful data out.
Oh, you mean my least favorite sim, the write-only sim, where the logs go to die? Yeah, that's not what we do in this class. So one of the things that always makes me sad is when people are saying that like logs are boring, and quite frankly, there's nothing worse than that. Logs should be awesome. And we actually have a really cool little demo that shows you what you can do with like network flow information, just DHCP logs. And because here on Security Weekly, got to give much love to Nessus Tenable. And we'll show you how you can use these sorts of things to learn all sorts of information about your environment.
Sweet.
So,
hey, Mick, a quick question. You mentioned the Elk stack in terms of the community version, the free as in free beer version. Can you distinguish for me what the difference between the community version is versus the commercial stuff?
Well, there's quite a few differentiators. Some of them are in the modules that you get. So the commercial version offers integrations that aren't readily available with the community. For instance, if you want to do LDAP or Active Directory integration, you have to do the commercial version. The commercial version comes with a different support model. And if you're going to be using these sorts of like a technology like this for business, for serious, you probably want to have some form of support rather than just community support. That's some of the big differences.
So in that line, does the class that you're developing, the SANS class, does it sort of work people up towards that sort of threshold where they should maybe consider the commercial version, or is it completely focused on just the open source implementation stuff?
That's an awesome question. What I would say this class more is about doing is kind of taking the sim off the table. It's really not the sim, it's what you do with it. And so what we try to show you as much as possible is how to hot rod that sim, how to get the telemetry, the log sources that you actually need, how to filter so that you're not drinking from a fire hose. And then we also once you have the right logs, we teach you post-ingestion things called enrichment, where you can do analysis on the log attributes and do things like find out, is this a dynamic DNS that they're going to, or is it a known malicious site? And that way, when a SOC analyst or whoever's interacting with the SIM can quickly and easily run some additional checks that might be computationally expensive and you wouldn't want to do on every single log record. But if it's one of interest, you can, you or a script could auto fire that allows you to very easily see what's going on and really tell a more interesting story.
I gotcha. So what I'm hearing is you don't necessarily focus on, what those different aspects of the commercial versus, freeware version is, but more of what you can do with it and let people make that judgment call themselves as to whether they want to upgrade to that commercial version down the road.
Absolutely. The shame and sorrow of it really is that in my experience, there's plenty of commercial SIMs, enterprise-grade SIMs that are really quite lovely, and people are using maybe 10 to 15% of the capabilities. And so it's like, using this, jet fuel funny car that we've got right here, using that to go out and get groceries. Yeah, you can do it, but it's a real expensive tool for that. So what we want you to do is use these tools to their full capability and really make it so that the days of pen testers and attackers getting in, rifling through a network are coming to a close. Because one of the things that really makes me sad as a pen tester, whenever I do pen tests, is there's a lot of times I'm doing attacks and I'm like, really? You're not seeing this? Like, really? Because I'm not even being quiet. And I think we've all had that experience where, at a certain point you're like starting to think like, hey, do I need to start rebooting machines? Like, what's it going to take? And one of the things that the students learned pretty early, we already had a nice discussion on this in day one. I'm TAing the class this week. One of the students was like, but there's all this artifacts. Like, how are we not seeing this? And like, it was really apparent, like all the people who were kind of grizzled sim veterans, and they just kind of hung their head in shame. And they're like, no, look, like we can't normally see this. And so it's all about taking little bits of telemetry, flipping it in new and interesting ways, and then using that to tell really interesting and compelling stories. Right now, sims kind of are like janky, and people are just using them for compliance. And while that's better than nothing, it really is a missed opportunity.
So,
Couldn't agree more.
Mick, why don't you show us some awesome stuff and dazzle us?
Sure. Before I dazzle you, though, I got to do a shameless plug. So we're teaching this class. It's in rotation. It's a newer class, but hey, shameless plug, Seth Meisner, another friend of the show, and I are going to be doing a co-teach in New Orleans. That's a one-time only event, folks, and it should be a hoot. This is also on demand. So now that I've done the requisite stuff, please don't hurt me, Sans. I hope you're happy. I'm going to show you some of the stuff that you can do with Cabana and Elk.
And so this class is recently on demand? Is that the kind of breaking news?
Just got released on demand. I think it was within the last week or two even. So if you can't, for whatever reason, get to one of the training events, you absolutely can come online and do it at your leisure.
Awesome.
So what I'm actually going to share with you is a really cool lab that it conceptually is so simple, but what you can do with it is dynamite. One of the things that you can do is actually turn normal telemetry into some really powerful detection tools. And in this case, what we've got here is a series of dashboards. And Cabana allows you to make these really gorgeous, easy-to-use dashboards that, quite frankly, helps you sell your security program to upper management. And that's needed because, every SIM or every SOC has a pew-pew map, and you need to build those to get that upper-level support. And what we're showing you here are a couple different dashboards that are quite interesting.
Hey, Mick.
Yeah.
I can only see your beautiful face, my friend.
You can only see my beautiful face.
I cannot see any beautiful dashboards. I mean, it's a toss-up between the two. But
there it is.
Look at that. Look how fast he made a beautiful dashboard appear. That's amazing.
Now it's beautiful dashboards.
And now it's not so much of a toss-up. I like the dashboard.
Yeah. So
Zing!
So dashboards in Cabana are made up of visualizations. And so the way you do this is you just make a query using a query language that is the syntax is very repeatable, and once you get a little bit of seat time with it, it becomes very simple to play with. And you can do things like consume, like what we've done is consumed bro logs. Now, I'm not going to spend much time talking about how to put bro into the SIM, other than to say there are plenty of good resources on how to have netflow or bro being placed into into your Elk instance. But once you have something like this, even bro or netflow data that shows people who are connecting to different time services can be interesting. For instance, in this environment, the ntp.ubuntu.com is the official time server that everybody should be syncing with. And if people are syncing to the time.windows.com, well, that means you've got either a machine that's misconfigured, or even more scary, you have a machine that is not configured appropriately, And it could be, maybe it's somebody brought in their own home system and it's a rogue device on your network. So doing something as very simple as seeing NTP traffic can allow you to help thin down the crowd of who's doing what. But there's more. So what we can do is we can play around with this asset dashboard. And one of the things that we love to do is we show you how to consume different types of log sources. And you can do things like consuming a DHCP log, which can be a very powerful resource. We also have a good section on how you can consume vulnerability scan logs. And we actually consume Nessus XML reports. And you can see the different vulnerabilities in your environment and make some really cool charts based off of that. Now, what's even neater, though, in my opinion, is you can also flip that, and instead of just using it for vulnerabilities, you can actually use this as a way to detect whether or not a system has been scanned. And what we've done here is we've got this query. The plugin ID is the plugin that we use to consume those logs, and each host and the IP that's affiliated with that is available, and then we have a count of one or more indicating that it has been successfully scanned via a credentialed scan. If a host is on, say, our DHCP log and is not on our credentialed scan list, we've got a problem because we've got a host that isn't accepting our login for our credentialed scanner, and we can start doing some analysis. And what you can do, if you actually true up this credentialed scan list, you can see that these are very IT company sounding host names, right? You bump this against that, and you very quickly see Gamer17 and Death Star. These guys stick out like sore thumbs, and now you can do some investigation based off of that if you so choose. And that's
Mick,
all.
I love that because that's like it's so simple. Like, why didn't I think of that kind of thing for shoring up your asset inventory?
Believe me, when I was going through this class the first time, so Justin Henderson's the guy who wrote it, and he asked me to be an early reviewer, and it was like every couple pages I was like, yeah, totally should have thought of that. That makes a whole lot of sense. And it was really embarrassing is like you can start doing things like even like things that I used to do as part of incident response, you can actually front load that and have it done in the SIM. For instance, the whole DHCP logs, you can use that as a early indicator. So when you see the DHCP request come in, you're also going to see the MAC address that's asking for that IP address. You can quickly do an enrichment or a bit off of that where you say, hey, does this MAC address even fit in my asset inventory? And if not, then we can start sending out the goon squad. And what blows my mind away is that this scales up so beautifully. So you can have an incredibly large enterprise, and as long as you have a list of what MAC addresses you're expecting, you'd be able to get that. And what's even sadder is one of the early demo runs of the class, we had a student that challenged Justin and said, hey, I'm in a huge company. I've got over 150,000 desktops, and people are bringing their own systems in. Like, how can I be expected to have a asset inventory of what MAC addresses are in my environment? And he goes, oh, cool. Like, watch this. And he did a query where we were consuming the switch logs, and he just started pulling out the MAC addresses live, like right then and there, and it was really awesome. So
yeah, it seems to me, it seems like something that not enough people do. That there's great, and I don't want to use this word, visibility that can be gained, but
I think that's the right word.
I think people go buy a lot of products and do a lot of elaborate things and spend a lot of money when if you were just really, and what I hear you saying, make it, you use some open source tools and you look at your NTP logs, your DNS logs, your DHCP logs, and your DNS logs, like even if you just focus on those 4 sources, you could solve a lot of problems.
Yeah, and what's really weird about this particular class is one of the things, as you know, when a SANS instructor starts learning a class, they somewhat haze them by making them teach a trickier spot of the class. And when they threw the courseware at me, I was kind of flipping through, and I was like, well, where's the tough part? Like, these are all really, like, tactically easy-ish things to do. There's just a ton of them. And I was like, I don't get it. Like, what's the tough one to do? And they were like, well, that's kind of the point. There's just dozens and dozens of little things that if you do, your environment becomes one gigantic sensor grid. There's one module that I'll actually be teaching about this week where we talk about how you can put host-based firewalls and use those, not even in blocking mode, but just in logging mode. And you can use that to detect lateral movement real time.
That's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's just baller. It's a really, really cool class, lots of lab. And like you said, to your point, it's not that any one of these things is technically challenging. It might be a little difficult given the scale of an environment, but it's, now that we've got technologies like Elk or Graylog or other big log parsers, there's really no more excuses. We now, as InfoSec professionals, as defenders, need to really up our monitoring. And when we say we watch the wall, we really have to start doing that.
Awesome.
Oof. Yeah, Mick, I think I'm going to talk to you offline about some of this stuff. I've got an idea for a talk coming up to some management-y types, and I think this will fit in real well with with the quote theme, so to speak.
Okay. Yeah. No. One thing I will tell you this. I really like about where things are going with InfoSec is that like DevOps and some of the other things have really pushed us to making our technologies more approachable to people. Because if you think about how we used to do incident response and things, even prior to SIMs, we would, hey, something's happening. Let's fire up our awk, copy paste this awk nastiness that the Unix Graybeard gave to me, and now I can find what's going on.
And now you have 2 problems.
Yeah, well,
you have the incident, and you solved a problem with awk.
Yeah.
Well, no, he didn't use Perl.
Clearly, the Graybeard wasn't that gray, or that beard.
Whoa.
No, you start to accumulate problems when you get sed, awk, and tr, and God. A lot of other utilities.
Cut.
Call,
yeah.
Call.
Yeah, cut's always like, I get sed and awk. I can't make any more progress. So then there's just like 3 cut commands piped to each other at the end.
Sed, awk, grep, cut, tr, and split.
Yeah, split. Yeah. Yes.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Unique has to be thrown in there too. Unique. That's a good one.
Yep.
Yeah, unique and maybe a little sort as well.
And sort, unique and sort. Yep, you're absolutely right.
Unique.
If you can't solve it with those, it's broken.
That's right.
It can't be solved.
That's the whole point of this. That's the whole point of this. You don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, you don't have to go down that rat hole. But I think Mick has a nice point. When you build the Elk stack, it's really all those commands that us old, like Unix, Linux, Graybeard. My beard's not really there, or it is gray. If it were there, it would be gray. That we said, I have a problem or an indicator. Let me go pull more information about it. We'd string together, a bunch of commands, or God forbid, we use Perl to go do it. And then now we can have an Elk stack, and a lot of those same kind of filters are really much easier to run.
Or you go take Sec 573 with Mark Baggett
with Python,
or Joff, and solve the problem.
Or
with Python.
Joff. Hey.
Yeah, I just said Joff. Or Joff. Or Joff.
Yeah.
We actually use some of Baggett's Python foo in the class of 555. We use freak.py, which allows you to do frequency analysis to determine if domain names are being programmatically generated, and it is a really cool thing. I don't know. All I can say is it's a really good time to be a geek. We're having better tools. I came up through the awk said cut, call, sort, unique type things, and it's really nice. We're going to a point where we now have cars as opposed to horseless carriage or horse and buggy type stuff.
Well, I think those bash tools though I think were just a small part of it. Like it was like the wheel, right? And maybe we had an axle and maybe we had a steering wheel, but it really wasn't all put together.
That's a good way of putting it, actually.
I've got to drop in a comment, and as a pen tester, I've noticed this more and more. What strikes me is the blue team game is massively improved over the last couple of years. I mean, really massively improved. And it's a good thing, right? We wanted that. We wanted, for so long, especially in our industry, you'd go to a con and it was all red, attack, attack, attack. And to see the balance start to shift, I think is a really, really good thing, because that's where the money is. Let's face it. I mean, it's about us giving good advice to the customers on a defense side, ultimately, to actually win as a security industry.
Yeah, it really weirded me out at DerbyCon 1 when I was talking. I think I might have been one of only 2 or 3 blue talks, and all of the others were red. And, don't get me wrong. Like, when I do pen testing, that's fun. I really do enjoy it. The problem is that we can't all be pen testers. And quite frankly, there's more of a need for blue team. So for those of you who are watching and want a job that, pays relatively well and, doesn't require you to be outside ever. We're never allowed outside. Take a look at being a blue teamer. It's not a bad way to make a living.
Well, the other thing, Mick, though, I think that's really important is because of the technology advances, because of what we're all doing together, blue team is becoming way more sexy than it used to be. I mean, it used to be, in my opinion, that blue teamers felt drowned, right? They felt like there was no way to climb the mountain. But there is ways now, right? We've got these awesome things, just what you're talking about in the class, that allow us to actually get some defense at scale, which is really making a difference.
Oh, yeah. No, I honestly, there were times that, I would be working with, peers when we were defending large enterprises. And, we'd be like, wow, it'd be really cool if there were some way that we could issue a command that would allow us to do memory capture at scale. And we just kind of sat there and we were like, well, that's just too damn bad. That just can't be done. And it was horrible. So to your point, we're having better tooling, which allows us to ask better questions, do deeper analysis, and finally understand our network in a way that allows us to have a meaningful chance at defending against the real attacks that are happening.
Mick, thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
I know you're at a SANS conference.
Yes.
You may or may not have eaten dinner and such, and you got a long day ahead of you tomorrow, so we'll let you go. Thank you very much. It was awesome. I'm excited about 555, right? Did I get that number right? I get my SANS numbers confused.
Yes, sir.
555.
Yep.
Everyone should take it.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. I had a hoot. Take care.
Thanks, Mick. With that, we're going to take a short break, come back, talk about the security news for this week. Cryptography is all about secret keys that need high-quality entropy to be truly random. NetRandom from Whitewood Security delivers pure quantum entropy on demand across the entire data center and out to the cloud. Think NTP, but for quantum entropy. Inoculate your applications from making weak crypto keys, all without having to change a line of code. Visit getnetrandom.com to learn how you can take control of your entropy supply and ensure crypto security today. Signal Sciences is the industry's first web protection platform that works in any cloud, any container, any platform as a service, and any modern application architecture. The Signal Sciences web protection platform can be deployed in next-generation WAF, RASP, or reverse proxy modes, giving customers ultimate flexibility and coverage. Protect your web applications with Signal Sciences web protection platform. Signal Sciences, protecting applications, connecting teams. For more information, check them out at signalsciences.com/PSW. Onapsis is the leading provider of solutions to protect ERP systems from cyber attacks. Customers can secure their SAP and Oracle business-critical platforms from espionage, sabotage, and financial fraud risks. Visit them on the web at onapsis.com. The SANS Institute, the most trusted source for computer security certification training and research. Visit SANS.org to explore their full curriculum and latest training offerings.
Pick one.
Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Do I have more? I think I have more announcements. I think I have one. At least I have a slow. Hold on.
Are there words in front of you, Paul?
They're coming. Hold
Words.
on. That was the mixed guest intro.
Word.
That's scroll it. Words. Word. Words.
Oh man, he's having it. You should not rely on the teleprompter, Mick.
I did it. So I read Mick's intro off the cuff. Chris Martin's coming on from Logarithm, excuse me, to do a webcast on December 13th, securityweekly.com/logarithm. Larry Pesce, who's right here, is coming on a webcast, securityweekly.com/pony for Pony Express. They're going to be awesome. You should subscribe. Great information in both of those webcasts that you'll want to hear. So do that. Okay.
Yes.
Well, there was an Apple vulnerability, which after I've consumed all this information, my thoughts on this is that it's totally lame.
It's not really a vulnerability as it's a misconfiguration, I would say. But can misconfigurations be vulnerabilities?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, they're absolutely vulnerabilities. Just define your terms and move on.
I had a really good link to this. Hold on. Someone did a really great technical write-up.
Oh, yeah, I put that link up like 2 days ago.
Was it you?
Scroll down.
Oh,
was it this one?
Hey, look, there's not Kevin. Hey, man.
Hey, Not Kevin's here. Welcome, Not Kevin.
Hey, introduce Not Kevin.
Yay.
I will.
There's a dude here, and it's not Kevin.
Not Kevin. How's it going, Not Kevin?
Oh, it's going that good, huh?
You're muted, not Kevin.
I don't know how to use technology.
Technology.
Yeah.
Is that apple juice or
is Apple using?
Is that apple juice or is it a urine sample or is it beer? What are you drinking?
This is the white birch Berliner Weiss.
Oh, very nice.
How is it?
Excellent.
Excellent.
Only from the finest glassware that he found at the water cooler.
Which means he's still at work.
Yes.
I live at work. My desk is
actually... He's a dedicated man of science.
So there was a great write-up that went into basically a security researcher followed the code as to why this vulnerability existed. And I will tweet it out. It was the best resource that I found on this vulnerability. Very good technical write-up. And now
it's called Why Blank Gets You Root.
Yes, thank you.
It's number one on my list of stories.
Your stories, not where I was looking, which was in Larry's stories, which are not Jeff's stories.
No.
Because Jeff and Larry are two totally different people. Thank you very much, Jeff. Objective C. I don't have do you know the researcher's name, Jeff, that published this?
I could click on the link and see.
Yeah, I don't see his name.
So the first one was Shethan177, who reported it to the Apple developer forums.
Yeah, but the real hero is whoever wrote this post, though.
Who wrote this post?
Who wrote this post? I want to give him credit.
I want to say it's the guy, Patreon.
Oh no, was it Patrick Wardle? It was Patrick Wardle. Okay, It was Patrick. We've had him on the show. He is like the expert in OS X security, so it doesn't surprise me that he did, in fact, write this post. And it is the best technical write-up. Jeff, I'm glad you linked to it because I failed in that why blank gets you root.
I got your back.
Thank you. My question, and I probably should have posed this question to Patrick.
It's your story number 7, by the way.
Oh, it is. Oh, I did have it in there. Okay, thank you. So
get the damn glasses.
My question is, a lot of people have said, well, the root password only becomes blank if you go into like your system settings and click the lock and enter root and then don't enter a password. My question is, if malware, how does malware simulate that behavior so that malware can actually set the password? When I tested it, I could not just go to a terminal shell after upgrading to High Sierra. If I went to a terminal shell, if I entered SU- and I tried to enter a password, nothing would work. Even after I went to system settings and set my root password to blank by entering root and just clicking OK twice, you do more than once. When I went back to the terminal shell, SU- or SU- space root, it didn't work. It still required a password. So my question is, how can malware simulate that behavior?
Better than you, apparently.
Yes, better than. I mean, I'm assuming that you could, just as in any operating system environment, hook the system calls to simulate my clicks and interaction with the GUI.
Sure.
So malware could essentially set your root password, and it doesn't have to set it to blank. It can set it to whatever
you can set
it wants
a password.
to. Correct. Go.
For the record, this does not work on El Capitan.
No, it does not.
Because I just tried it.
There was some speculation as to if the issue exists only in upgrades or clean installs. Does anyone know definitively if it's a clean install of High Sierra, if it still has this issue or not?
I was successfully able to do it in an upgrade. So,
yeah, me too. Mine was an upgrade.
It is also important to know that this was patched yesterday. So if you have not grabbed the latest patch for your OS X device, I highly suggest it.
Right. Well, put it this way.
I have to say,
the patch was released yesterday. Whether or not folks have actually patched it may be a different story.
And by yesterday, we mean November 29th for those of you listening in the days and weeks to come.
And the patch doesn't require a reboot.
Right.
And Apple patched it pretty fast. I mean, I will give Apple props here for patching this really quickly. However, I will take some points away from Apple for not having a public open bug bounty for OS X. I believe they do have a bug bounty, but it's a closed program. And no disrespect to the people in the closed program.
Right.
Who knows what restrictions are put on them, and how that works, or where they're steered towards in order to get bug bounties.
So maybe that's your question that you started this with, Paul, the question of whether it's a vulnerability or not. What you're really asking is it a bug or not, and would it qualify for a bug bounty, open or closed?
Clearly, it's a feature.
Clearly.
I believe it is a vulnerability. I think it's a very reliable privilege escalation vulnerability that could likely be exploited if you were to get some malicious software contracted on your system through another mechanism. Everything I've read and tested with this vulnerability, it's not remotely exploitable. The user has to take some action to put malicious software, or you have to somehow contract malicious software outside of the scope of this vulnerability on your system. It would then use this vulnerability to obtain escalated privileges.
Yep. And or control a GUI to be able to make that happen.
Which, I mean...
Sounds like there should be a medical analogy in there somewhere.
No, certainly not. Which, I mean, a lot of people have administrator access on their Macs anyway, or when you download something from the internet on OS X, it asks you, hey, you downloaded this from the internet. Are you sure you want to run it? 99.9% of the people all the time without fail. Oh, yes, run this. Yes. Run this. It came from a trusted source. It's fine.
Now, I will say that having the administrative rights on your Mac is not the end all be all, given that there are times, depending on how your system is configured, if you want to copy something in the applications folder, it needs you to authenticate with your current users.
They have improved upon that over the years.
Yeah,
it prompts you for your password. However, if you I guess you'd still need elevated privileges to put a keystroke locker to grab the user's password.
Right.
So I guess it was significant privilege escalation
right,
vulnerability.
Right. And the other ones, if you're at the command line, you want to run in something that's privileged, you need to use sudo. You may not have a user's password to make that happen.
Correct.
So if you can control a GUI, you could enable the root account, which would give you the ability to have an account on that system with elevated privileges with the password of your choosing that you don't need to do sudo with.
Correct.
So significant privilege escalation for it.
Yeah, I mean, even if I don't think the initial dialog, I don't know if the initial dialog box, when I tested it, I changed my username to root. I left the password blank. I clicked OK. I did it again. I clicked OK. The password was still blank, and my root password was set to blank. I don't know if you enter a password, does that become your password? Or do you have to set it to blank and then go change your password? In either case, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter, right? The attacker is going to control the value of your root password, whether they have to set it to blank the first time or not, right? It doesn't.
I think it's specified in that article. I think he goes through all the permutations of how it works and what works. So read the article
that Jeff and I both linked to.
Yes, but I linked it. I posted it like 2 days ago.
Yes.
So I mean, is this a big deal?
I was more interested after reading that article in wondering, having worked for a software company for a while, where was the SDLC? Where was the QA? I mean, stuff's always going to happen, but this seemed kind of like something that should have been caught early on and almost like a design phase, because it seemed like more of like a logic error.
Yeah,
the way I was reading it.
I agree. I think it does more so call into question Apple's security practices specific to their operating system, more so than this flaw being really bad or not, right? I think the major news story here is how easy it was introduced, not caught, and then exploitable.
Now, and I saw some chatter on Twitter. I forget who it was. I apologize. Otherwise, I would give a shout out. But somebody I was back and forth with was saying that they had seen this years ago and even like months ago or something like that. It was being advertised on a discussion forum as basically a feature, basically a way to help people reset their accounts or something like that.
Interesting.
I think I have a link to that article too, but I don't know which one it is, or it might be buried within the. Actually, I'll find it and I'll put it up there. How's that?
Awesome. Thank you. There are reports
I believe
that it
I
was
saw
found.
that too.
Yeah, it was found earlier this month.
Yep. On the Apple developer forums. It's in that article too.
Yep.
Yeah,
First thing.
Yeah, it is in there.
Yep. November 13th.
There you go. But somebody else on Twitter was saying that they had known about it years ago. That it was known. It was a known way for like the help desk to help people out. So it was a feature.
Now, what's interesting is if you have iCloud and someone else gains control of your iCloud account and you set a firmware password through iCloud, you lock that device. How do you get around that? That goes beyond this vulnerability. This vulnerability is in the operating system. That potentially locks you out of the operating system. I know someone that's stuck in this situation right now. So if anyone has any comments, I probably should reach out to Patrick.
Asking for a friend?
Asking for a friend.
Yeah.
It's not me.
Right.
It is actually for a friend.
Right. Pick a good password.
I did not get drunk and lock myself out of my Mac.
Because the password was
password. Right.
Yeah.
It was password 123.
That's right. Well, your firmware lockout is 4 digits, so brute forcing is probably. I don't know what brute force protections are in. It's an interesting question.
Huh.
Oh, so in that case, the password was 1234.
1234. Yeah. Right. Password for my luggage.
0666.
Yeah. Anyway.
Next story.
Yeah, I thought that was going to be more interesting than it really was, but to be honest with you, I was hoping for some.
No, I think it was damn good, damn interesting. Damn interesting.
Larry, what do you got?
Jeff and I have a story, his number 2, my number 1. was the NSA contractor arrested for leaking the shadow broker's hacking tools.
So the question is who, or the question is
who?
How?
Yeah, it's who.
So a contractor for the NSA was arrested allegedly for leaking shadow brokers' tools, but they did not release any names.
So enter Brian Krebs. Does he have a name?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Enter Brian Krebs. He allegedly has a name of. Where is it? I just lost it. A gentleman by the name who I'm going to butcher. Damn it. Jeff, you got it. You got it handy.
Scroll.
Scroll.
I'm not helping you out this time, Larry.
Gennady Sidelkinov.
Some good butchering there.
Yeah.
It's an Irish name.
Yes.
So how did he come to discover this information? I'm sure it's all in the Brian Krebs blog post, but
yes.
Summarize for us, Larry.
So it was reported to Brian Krebs about 3 months ago from an independent consulting company who wanted him to investigate and corroborate and such. It sort of fell off the radar a little bit, and the story in the New York Times showed up about someone being arrested for the shadow brokers leak, and that it was nameless. And then Brian started to put these two together. Put these two pieces together and went, holy crap, whoever that was that submitted it 3 months ago actually may have been right. So he wrote this article about what had happened. Turns out with the shadow brokers leak, there was a bunch of documents that pointed to tailored access operations with a whole bunch of various pointers to locations and logos and all this type of stuff. And then some additional tying of documents together. And by looking at all of the metadata of all that documentation, there were 3 names that stood out. 2 that worked for the NSA and 1 who was an independent consultant.
And it's always the independent consultant.
And it was the contractor rather.
Contractor.
And, so that was the assumed contractor. So,
now, Larry, I haven't had a chance to read this story. Is this connected? There seems to be so many contractor stories at the NSA recently. Sure. Is this the same one who they think files were taken via Kaspersky and uploaded up?
I think they mentioned that in the article.
Yeah, they did, and I don't know how much.
It's not the main. Yeah. It's not the main one, but they wondered if that might have also happened. I think is the way it was framed.
Right. So the interesting one, reading this article, going through, there's one paragraph in here that I thought that was pretty interesting. Was Krebs on Security was first made aware of the metadata in the shadow brokers leak by Mike Poor, Rob Curtin-Seifert, and Larry Pesci. All three are security experts within Guardians. Hey.
Nice.
So yeah, we figured this out 3 months ago and gave it to Krebs to vet, and apparently he did.
So you didn't know you were going to see your name in the article until you're like stumbling upon it, huh?
No, we had an idea. We provided it to him and basically let him run with it. And if there were any questions afterwards, how we did the analysis and any of that type of stuff, that we were happy to follow up. And he recreated all the analysis and was able to recreate what we had done and came up with the same answers.
That's really cool.
Yep. So cool. It's like, well, that's interesting.
Yeah, I was reading the article. I was like,
you're famous
I know him.
Yeah, I know that guy.
I know that guy.
I was reading the article and I was like, I know that guy. That's Mike Poor. Wait. Yeah, but no, the article raises some really interesting questions as well. I thought was that thinking about the way NSA does some of their operations was you start doing the OSINT on Glenn, the contractor. You find out he's a database guy. And why did the database guy have access to all sorts of classified documents that wasn't maybe in a database? And thinking about the principal lease privilege and, where was the actual breakdown that happened that allowed this gentleman to be editing documents and leaving his trail of metadata in these documents that arguably, based on his job function and what his expertise is, should have never had any insight to?
Well, it's really interesting. but I really can't comment on this at all.
I figured as much. So, yeah. So, principal least privilege? Sure.
In principle,
right?
That's right.
Yep.
Does anyone have an HP laptop?
I used to.
I do, but
was that the one that tragically died here in the studio?
I'm kidding. No, that was a Dell. I'm
sorry.
I think I have one in the house somewhere.
I do have one, but it's been quite some time since I've actually used it. It sits at my ham shack and is kind of flaky. So
maybe it has the HP Touchpoint Analytics client.
Oh,
which apparently sends telemetry data. They haven't qualified in the article exactly what telemetry means. It could be what application you're using. Who knows? Users report that it's consuming 95% of the CPU at various points.
Maybe that's why that laptop is a steaming pile of shit.
And the HP installed the software without users' knowledge. There are instructions on how to remove it. I'm not sure exactly what data is being leaked, but it has been shown to be sending data back to HP. And it kind of underscores the point that when I buy a device, I like to think that it's mine, and I can control what software is being installed on it.
Yeah.
It's not so much the case when we look at Samsung and some of their phones. You can't uninstall certain apps without jailbreaking the phone.
Yeah.
And all of these laptops from HP and Dell and other major manufacturers have software installed. I mean, you remember back in the day when you buy a laptop, this was really bad.
Yeah.
The bloatware, they call it, right?
You wipe it and reinstall the OS right from the get-go.
Right.
And then, of course, if you want drivers, you have to install the third-party utilities. Oh, God.
Yeah, or the utilities from the motherboard or computer manufacturer. Oh, God.
And then you may end up with your bloatware right back again.
Exactly.
And typically that software gets flagged by some antivirus systems, is what I found as well.
And imagine having to do that with 15 floppies. Just saying.
Yep. Or more, 32 floppies for Windows 95.
Or, I mean, you could just install Linux and avoid that problem altogether.
Yeah, exactly. Slackware for 3 floppies. What?
I mean, this unfortunately is not an uncommon thing.
No.
I mean, it was Lenovo just a couple months ago were caught with the whole Superfish bloatware thing that was also shipping up a whole bunch of sensitive information.
And I think
they were actually slapped with a pretty big absolutely not by the FTC. I'm wondering if the same thing's going to happen with HP here.
Likely it will. The FTC is, I think, in my opinion, has done a good job of slapping companies around that are exhibiting this behavior, Kevin. I don't know how you feel about it, but I think they have done a good job.
I mean, they're, for all the way you look at it, I mean, they're actually harming user security. Either installing software without their knowledge. That software generally opens up different attack vectors, or can just damage the machine outright. Or, at least in Superfish's particular example, it was pretty much killing the outbound bandwidth of the machine.
Or invading the user's privacy.
Yeah, it all kind of encompasses that. This is you bought the laptop. You didn't buy all this bloatware with it, or I guess technically you did if you read the license. I guess it's kind of an interesting argument.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Whoa! Who reads the license
agreement?
Well, I guess
and it gets worse than that because I think most of us in the U.S. and many other countries are used to having bandwidth that you may not notice the communications. Right? You're like, whatever, my bandwidth's fine. But there are some parts of the world that don't have that sort of bandwidth, right?
That's right.
And so, it's a real impact.
Yeah, we'll have bandwidth. We just won't have control over what we have bandwidth to anymore.
Well, I mean, it's
exactly.
we're it's kind of an oversimplification of the U.S. and its infrastructure. I think. I mean, most people don't have what we'd call high-speed internet here. People are metered.
Yep.
I mean, your high speed is 3 megs a second. And that's only available in most metropolitan areas. You start going into the Midwest or Central, people are using point to point and satellite more often than not.
Yep. Just think about John. Like, what was he doing for so many years? They had a T1 ran to the house.
Yeah.
So they could get high speed internet.
And
but
that's metered.
I don't know. He almost doesn't count.
They're automatic. That caused a huge issue.
Yeah.
I've got a buddy that lives somewhere in the Midwest. Maida used to work where I used to work, and he does a lot of forensic stuff, and he's on a DSL line. So he's sometimes taken days to just download the files that he needs to look at.
Mm-hmm. God forbid it does. Somebody doesn't pick up the phone in the middle.
Partially that's by
downloading
choice, I will
wait.
add. He could upgrade, but he likes, he's a tinfoil hat kind of guy, wants to live out in the woods. So the best he's willing to get is a DSL line.
No, I think that actual issue, despite there's a lot of issues here, right? There's certainly a massive violation of privacy. There's certainly introducing security vulnerabilities into your system that you should not have to deal with. And then beyond that, the bandwidth consumption issue is not an equal playing field, right? Some of us, we're very spoiled. We use it for our industry. We might have a fiber running to the house and everything, but that is not universal by any means. And that's what everybody's pointing out. I think you're right, Kevin. I said it was not such an issue in the U.S., but actually that's not correct. The U.S. is not even an equal playing field across the board. So.
We're actually one of the worst countries when it comes to averages of internet speed, which is ironic, to say the least.
Well, and that's a population thing too, I think, Kevin. If you look at it, depends on how you look at the data, right? Like more people with slow internet, and it just means we have more people than, in a higher concentration.
Not trying to win my argument.
Not necessarily. We're not that big a country, population-wise.
It's true.
Well, I think that conversation is going to digress into lots of non-security issues. So,
like net neutrality.
Yeah. I wrote my senators on that.
When we had it, so I'll drink to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Woohoo! It's like just as I'm about to dump cable too.
Damn
right? Like I am so ready. I'm so ready.
Speaking of which, we've had multiple requests to do a podcast, maybe a little bit outside of the security realm.
Yeah.
To do cutting the cord.
Yeah. Like I'm ready. Like like Sling was the app that I just purchased a subscription to, where I'm like, yeah, okay, now I definitely don't need cable. Like I'll give a little bit of money to Sling. Mm-hmm. I'll put an antenna in my attic, and I'll use my HD home run device, and we'll talk about this in a segment. That's fine. And I'm like, I'm ready. But now, if we don't have net neutrality anymore, the cable provider it's in its financial best interest to push me to keep my cable subscription. So what does that mean? Are those services such as Sling and Netflix and Amazon and potentially Kodi, which is other issues, but elephant in the room, right?
Right.
These other services, YouTube, you know?
They just rate limit those into the ground.
Exactly. So it's a pretty clear-cut issue. I don't know if anyone wants to take the other side of this debate. Like, I don't get it. I don't know if the people that are like, yeah, whatever, like that's going to happen is beyond our control, but I think it's something we should fight for.
So I think the providers of content, such as ABC, NBC, and all the cable providers and such, it's in their interest for their business model, because so many people are trying to cut the cord.
Yep.
And they've got to maintain some viability in the market, so that for them, this whole lack of net neutrality is a good thing, where they can charge more to have higher speeds for these various services.
Like, you want to have Netflix and Sling and all that stuff. You can give us an extra $50 a month, and you'll be totally fine.
Right. And
so that I'm still giving you
you don't want cable anymore. We totally get it. We totally understand. You can go do your thing, and we're going to rate you into the ground. Oh, you want access to those things? That'll be another $50 a month.
Yep.
That makes them viable back into the marketplace. And
that's capitalism,
right?
And in some ways, it's kind of sounding like the banking bailout. Telecoms are too big to fail. Yep. We got to prop them up. And if you think about, for again a segment of the population that has investment portfolios and 401k plans, look how many of those are tied into telecom companies and how well they do. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely an economic issue here beyond just the pure capitalism and greed type of element. From what I've heard, it's we can bitch and complain and protest all we want, but it's going to happen.
Mm.
Well, I disagree with it happening. I don't want to get deep into the politics. I did write my representatives. That's going to fall on deaf ears, I think. But in terms of cutting the cord, just for a minute, I've had an HD antenna on my rig for 12 years now. I mean, I cut the cord years ago, and haven't regretted it since. I may regret it now. The rules may change, and I would be very disappointed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what else are we talking about?
Speaking of
disappointment,
financial
crisis and disappointment. On a happy note,
or financial interests. Paul, you've got this cryptocurrency mining strip thing.
Yeah, is that a DVD drive in your laptop?
No, it's the slot for one, but it's been removed many years ago and replaced with disk.
Oh.
Yeah, dude, this is a mid-2011 MacBook Pro.
Wow.
Yeah, about this MacBook Pro 13-inch, early 2011.
Wow.
With 16 gigs of RAM.
Got your money's worth from that one.
And it's still going. I would love to replace it, but I can't justify it because I'm still using the muck out of it.
Right.
And it works fine. It works fine for everything I needed to do, including multiple VMs at any given time.
So you can invest in some cryptocurrency and then use that for a laptop upgrade.
Exactly.
Right. It's beautiful.
Exactly.
It's beautiful, man.
Exactly. I mean, this is the people complain about Macs all the time, but this is one of the best investments I've ever made. Some minor upgrades over the years, and it's been great. But it wouldn't do so good at mining cryptocurrency. And I find this kind of interesting in that the way the cryptocurrency thing has evolved is that having mining scripts still running is kind of cool, given that there's more than one cryptocurrency you may want to be interested in nowadays. I mean, clearly everyone's heard about Bitcoin, but the practicality of mining Bitcoin on any commodity hardware anymore is crazy.
Null.
Crazy. Yeah, I mean the time, power, money trade-off is just not there. It's getting better all the time, but it's still not there.
Unless you trick everyone's browsers,
right?
In this article,
unless you get it for free, and then
unless you get it for free and take advantage of other people's computers.
There is the concept of joining large pools, but even there, the practicalities. You're competing against massive data farms in Asia that are running, lots of GPUs and ASIC-based hardware. It's just not there.
Yep. So that said, I didn't read the article, but did it mention what cryptocurrency it was mining?
I'm not sure.
Let's see. Because there is still some cryptocurrency that is worth potentially mining, like Bitcoin
Monero,
Cash,
perhaps.
Monero, Ethereum, those types of things still do have some benefit in that the blockchain is still already enough on, and there's some easy work units to complete.
Right. Well, if you designed it right, you could send down to your mining scripts to mine whatever currency was your flavor of the month or whatever.
Right. Or as part of a pool, that it divides that workload between all sorts of stuff and switches.
These 50,000 nodes, you go do this cryptocurrency. These 50,000, you do these.
Yeah, exactly. And then you reap the benefits in the pool. So, yeah, it's been. I hadn't followed Bitcoin or anything for a long time, but I just recently had a vested interest in it. In that, many years ago, Winter Olympics. What was that? Last Winter Olympics was what?
Oh boy, you're asking hard questions now, Larry.
You're talking about Sochi?
Yes.
14.
Yes,
2014.
Matt Lauer
had an incident there.
That's why I remembered it, because Matt Lauer was there.
So about
that's how I remembered it.
About 2013, as a joke, I stood up a really small GPU rig and started mining Dogecoin. And then I amassed like a couple 100,000 Dogecoin because it was really easy to mine. And then some folks decided that it was a really great idea to the Jamaican bobsled team qualified for the Winter Olympics. Cool runnings. But they had no money to get there. So some folks said, hey, let's take donations to get them to be able to go. And the way we're going to take donations is we're going to take donations of Dogecoin. So people went and bought Dogecoin, and because there was a demand, the price skyrocketed for Dogecoin, and I sold all of my Dogecoin for Bitcoin. I sold a couple 300,000 Dogecoin for Bitcoin, and I remember cashing out some Bitcoin at the time to pay for the investment that I had made, and I broke even, and I didn't think much of it. And a couple weeks ago, Bitcoin hit $5,500, and I'm like, man, I was doing that stuff and cashed out when it was like $300 a Bitcoin, like when it started to go up a little bit because of ransomware. And I'm like, man, I wonder if I think I have like 0.00001 Bitcoin. And I fire up my Bitcoin wallet and it tells me how much I have, but the blockchain is like 4 years out of date. And I had 0.288 Bitcoins. And Bitcoin was at $6,300.
So you have a couple thousand?
That was just over $2,000. Like, but with this wallet, I had no idea that I like even should care about was just
you
over
just found 2,000?
It got better. It got better. So by the time I finally got the
Bitcoin's...
by the time I got the blockchain downloaded and could actually do something with it, it hit just shy of $10,000.
Wow. Yeah, that's right. It's at $10,000.
Yeah. Well, it hit $11,000 yesterday, and it's back down to just over $10,000. But it hit just under $10,000, and I cashed half of it out. And what a merry fucking Christmas it was in the Pesci household. No, seriously.
So how do you cash it out?
So I used I transferred all of the funds to a wallet called BitPay. And part of the reason was that I'm like, I have money. Where am I going to spend it? Like, how am I going to get this out? Do I move it to cash and then it becomes taxes and all that stuff? So I'm like, what vendors use Bitcoin? And like the first one that I knew of was Adafruit. I'm like, $1,000 order at Adafruit. Oh my God. I'm like getting awkward boner. And so I go to, so I'm like, what vendor do they use? And sure enough, they use BitPay. So I'm like, great, get the BitPay wallet, get everything transferred over to my BitPay wallet and go spend stuff. And turns out I can only actually spend $275 for all of the things that I wanted at Adafruit. So I'm like, what do I do with the rest? And I'm messing around with the client at the bar a week and a half ago when we were at Sans Hackfest. And it was midnight and Bitcoin had just hit like $9,500. And I'm like, buy Amazon gift card. How does this work? Blunk. And I click the buy Amazon gift card. It's like, how much Amazon gift card do you want? Well, fuck it, $1,000. Book. Here's your code. Apply it to your Amazon account. Boom. Logs in Amazon, applies it, and I have $1,000 credit at Amazon. I'm like, well, that was fucking easy.
Worked great.
I'm like, damn. I guess I know where all the kids are getting their gifts from this year for Christmas.
Black Friday, Cyber Monday at Amazon with Larry Pesci.
Hell yeah. And then, so that was at just about $9,000. And the other day we were sitting down and my wife and I were talking about, what else to get the kids for Christmas and stuff. And so we ordered some stuff that we needed. And I'm like, well, all right, well, we'll get some other stuff. And I'm like, I wonder what Bitcoin prices is. And Bitcoin was about $10,200 per. I'm like, buy $1,000 at Amazon. Like, what do we want to buy for the kids now? Trampoline? Yes. So yeah, it was like.
I hope the kids don't listen.
No, they don't. They don't.
Okay, good.
They don't. But yeah, it was like, and it was one of those deal of the day trampolines too. So it was like 75% off.
Yeah.
Like, yes. So that's how I cashed out. You can also with BitPay, not that I get any money from them aside from my cashing out of Bitcoins. You can also get a credit card from them that pulls from your Bitcoin wallet.
Really?
Yeah.
Fascinating.
I just sent it all to. I used it at Adafruit and then I used it at Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, that's great.
Like that was easier than I thought.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Small investment paid off.
Yeah. Like small investment and sit on it and I look like a friggin' hero. No,
Had we only bought tons of Bitcoin when.
Oh my gosh.
It was, or mined it when it was mineable.
Yeah, exactly. Well, of course, now you just.
Well,
need
I think
to go mine the other stuff.
what's really stunning is at the end of 2016, Bitcoin was less than $1,000.
Yeah. And largely the reason why I got pushed up that far was still because of ransomware. You want to unlock your system, that'll be one Bitcoin.
Right. So now we're sitting in a world where Bitcoin's peaked $10,000 and come just shy of that. But I mean that's a 1,200% rise. It's insane.
Other stories that we have this week
to round out our news. To give you an idea, right now Bitcoin is at just about $9,800, which has dropped from 11,000 as of yesterday, day before yesterday.
And did your wife tell me that you adopted me, by the way, Larry?
No. I don't have nearly that much Bitcoin left. And I think what little I have left, I'm just going to sit on until it hits $20,000.
There you go. Hey, back to Paul.
Kevin is waving his hand like he wants to say something.
I read an article about Bitcoin today that I thought really kind of put a lot of this in perspective outside of the rise in price. The entire network now uses more power than Ireland, and a single transaction on the Bitcoin network uses more power than your house does in a week.
Nice. And I just saw something today that I didn't get to digest because it was literally while we were sitting down to the show that there was an article posted to Pastebin about some critical flaw in the blockchain about Bitcoin, and it wasn't necessarily terribly senile. It was pretty senile and that type of stuff, so I didn't get a chance to read it. But the comments were like, this dude's on crack. So, but... Sorry, moving along. Other stories. Joff.
Me? Oh, I got nothing.
Jeff.
I didn't post any stories. Let's go to the NSA story. I think that's really awesome, by the way. Let's go to that. No, we did that already.
Well, there's another one.
There's two. There's one on the red disc. We could talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
It's your story, Paul. Go.
Yeah, but you used to work there, so you could explain it way better than I can.
Which means I can't say a whole lot.
So ZDNet has reported another data leak associated with the NSA. It's a disk image when unpacked and loaded as a snapshot of the hard drive dating back to May 2013 from a Linux-based server that forms part of the cloud intelligence sharing system known as Red Disk. That's all I know. It's anyway.
It appears
it's something that was out there available that shouldn't have been.
Yeah, and doing the folks that did some analysis and/or looked at what Red Disk was all about was that it looks like it was supposed to be a quote customizable cloud system, so that they could you'd have a machine with Red Disk on it that could basically share intelligence across multiple as you go bonk, and now I've got this sharing system type of thing. That's the way I'm reading it.
Mm-hmm.
So not really a big deal.
Not a good couple of weeks for our government and leaving data on S3. Wasn't it just last week? I think it was the same organization that found Red Disk also found that DoD left 1.8 billion scraped social media posts.
That's correct, Kevin.
Dope.
So do you want to segue into the history and reinvention of network access control, NAC?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Go for it.
How is that being reinvented in your mind, Joff?
Well, it's been reinvented so many times over the years, it's hard to really get a perspective around it, right? But the interesting part is, and this article claims, right, that when you reread the piece that this IT managers in the past shared that experience about NAC products, the author of this article was struck how little it was changed, right? Networks are still protected on the macro level by keeping systems updated with the latest patches, blah, blah, blah. But I was interested in how much had changed on the micro level, how homogeneous networks were back then, right? That was then. NAC have come a long way, but the products have improved. The endpoint and security landscape, I'm quoting from the article here, obviously, have become way more complex. We have lots more devices. So, the interesting thing to me is access control vendors have been fighting for this for years, right? And the 802.1x client has been the core of it, and what we can do with Ethernet-based authentication before something actually enters the network. And the biggest vulnerability that has existed for many, many, many years, and this is me talking now and not the article, has been that so many devices don't have the 802.1x enabled supplicant software, and so they become exceptions in the NAC world, right? And those exceptions become possibilities for exploiting flaws and vulnerabilities in networks, right?
The exceptions are your downfall. Think printers.
Yeah, printers, perfect example, right? And I've been on several networks in the past year or two. Surprise, surprise. But one of the access methods that I used was to go after either printers or wireless access points. And I actually found a wireless access point sitting under a desk that I unplugged, plugged my own device into it, and got myself a DHCP lease after mimicking the MAC address. But that's not a big deal these days, and was able to explore quite a bit of that network as a result of essentially a whitelisted media access control address or Ethernet address, right?
Right, because everybody
the,
needs to be able to communicate with the access points and or the printers.
That's right, and this is the big downfall with NAC, right? So, sort of segueing back, the advance that has happened over time, and there's Cisco, there are others that have gone into this world where they tried to profile devices before, and during network admission, where they said, well, only the good guys will pass, right? Only the guys that walk like a duck, that quack like a duck, that actually seemingly are a duck. Maybe they have a certain OUI on the MAC address. Maybe they have certain SNMP characteristics on the network. Only those entities can actually enter the network. So it sort of took the world of NAC to a NAC on steroids kind of place. But
I think a lot of them, Joff, along those lines, have pivoted into being IoT security companies now. So it's like the ways around NAC have now become like their shining story because they worked so hard in R&D over the years to overcome that now they're like, oh, we can identify all these IoT devices. Hey, guess what? We're an IoT security company. Is it Forescout? I think it's Forescout that is messaging on that today.
Well, and I think the reason for that, what I was trying to get to there, Paul, was it became so complex to deploy that at an enterprise level. They decided that a sort of a niche market was a much better way to go, albeit not very small in its niche, but definitely a market that needed to be served. So it totally is it's an interesting pivot. Right.
Yes.
To that whole evolution of technology.
Well, thank you, Joff, and everyone else on the panel today. That will conclude this episode of Paul Security Weekly. Woo! Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. Nice to have you, Not Kevin. Nice to have you, Jeff and Joff, and of course, Larry.
That's always nice to have me.
Always nice to have you in studio.
That's
take
what
us out,
push
Larry.
the button. Push the button.
Over and